Amelia here. Thanks for joining me for BTN. Here's what's coming up today. Meet a 40,000-year-old skeleton called Mungo Man. Find out how heat waves actually happen. And we investigate how gravity works by dropping things over and over and over again. You'll see all that and more soon, but first, we're heading to Cape Town, which after a long-running drought is now just months away from running out of water. Here's how the residents there are trying to delay what they're calling Day Zero, or the day the taps dry up.
Just the sight of rain is enough to get people here in Cape Town really excited.
This is coming straight off our roof.
Cape Town is a city in South Africa, and for a couple of years now it's been struggling with a really bad drought. But in recent months, the situation's got worse, and a bit of rain isn't anywhere near enough to help. Water reserves are so low that the whole city is at risk of running out. Authorities predict taps could be turned off by June 4th, and they're calling that Day Zero. Here in Australia, water restrictions are something many of us have experienced. But Cape Towns are something else entirely. People have been allowed just 50 litres a day since February 1st, and 50 litres doesn't actually get you that far. For example, dishes and laundry, 18 litres a day, a 90-second shower, 15 litres, one toilet flush, 9 litres, washing your hands, 3 litres, cooking, 2 litres, drinking water, 2 litres, one dog bowl, 1 litre, and that's your 50. If you want more than a minute and a half long shower, or to go to the toilet more than once a day, you're in trouble. And people have gone through some extreme lengths to save water. Showering just a handful of times a week, or avoiding washing their clothes.
We can't believe nowadays that we miss out on rain. It's very dry in Cape Town, but we know that God will send the rain.
As the drought continues, people are asking questions about how it was allowed to get so bad, and what's going to happen next. In 2014, the city's water sources were at capacity, but as drought stretched on, water supplies have been stretched to their limits.
The water situation is making our lives very difficult because we apparently now today we've got water, tomorrow we don't.
I think the water is going to run out, and it's very scary to think of it, but I think it's a reality.
This will be the disaster above all disasters. No city in the world has had to deal with such a situation as the taps running dry.
If Day Zero does arrive, many will have to go to collection points guarded by security forces for a daily ration of just 25 litres of water. But in the meantime, the restrictions are making a difference, pushing back the date of Day Zero from April to May and now June. Hopefully, by then, these areas will be recovering.
Next today, the oldest skeleton ever found in Australia, Mungo Man, has been returned to his home 40,000 years after his death. He spent the past 40 of those years being studied by scientists. But while he's now been returned to the area he once lived in, there are still arguments over what should happen next.
42,000 years. That's more than 15 million sunrises. It's an amount of time pretty much impossible to imagine, and that's how long ago Mungo Man lived. Mungo Man is the nickname given to the oldest skeleton ever found in Australia, and his discovery rewrote our history. Mungo Man was found here, in the Willandra Lakes region at Lake Mungo. It doesn't look much like a lake these days, but back then it would have been really wet here. Geologist Jim Bowler found Mungo Man's skeleton on a research trip in 1974. The discovery was a big deal because it proved that Aboriginal people had been here about twice as long as previously thought.
Mungo Man did show Australia that Aboriginal people been here for a very, very long time.
Scientists were able to tell a lot about what Mungo Man's life would have been like back then by studying his skeleton and the burial site. Mungo Man was about 50 when he died, which is pretty old for an early human. He was tall, with big teeth, but missing two at the front. And he had bad arthritis in his elbow, most likely from spending a lot of time throwing a spear. When he was buried, he was laid out carefully and sprinkled with red ochre, so he was probably an important guy.
It was a remarkable moment of realisation of just how modern the earliest Australians really were.
To do all this research on Mungo Man, scientists took him away from where he was buried and kept him in a university lab. This made the traditional Aboriginal owners of the Willandra Lakes angry because nobody asked their permission.
These are our ancient cemeteries. These are our burial grounds. These are what we hold very dear to us because we know our old people are sleeping there. Taking the bones away and taking them to a city is taking that person away from their spirit.
It led to years of disagreement between the scientists who were studying Mungo Man and the people who wanted him back in his resting place. In November last year, Mungo Man's skeleton was given back to the traditional owners of his land. Jim says over time, he's learned why that was such an important thing to do.
I realised that when we took those bones away, there was a lot of hurt amongst Aboriginal people. We owe an apology for science of what science has done to the Aboriginal people in the past.
And the apology was accepted.
Thank you, Tim. We welcome what you just said. Thank you.
Thank you.
But that's not quite the end of the story. The traditional owners of the Willandra region are now deciding whether Mungo Man should be reburied and left to rest forever, or whether scientists should be allowed to study him again when technology improves. Until they decide, Mungo Man is being kept in a secret place on the country he once called home. If you've got a question about Mungo Man, ask me live on Friday during Ask a Reporter. Head to our website for all the details.
First up, there are a lot of people calling for Barnaby Joyce to step down as Deputy Prime Minister. Last Friday, the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull criticised Mr Joyce, who's been in a bit of trouble lately. Soon after, Mr Joyce fired back, calling the PM inept, among other things. He's taken a week off work, but says he intends to come back as Deputy PM afterwards. Meanwhile, the clean-up has begun in northern Western Australia after it was hit by a Category 2 cyclone over the weekend. Cyclone Kelvin recorded wind gusts of more than 150 k's an hour and damaged some major roads, which authorities say could take months to be repaired. Broome is now on track for one of its wettest seasons on record, with around 1 year's worth of rain falling in just 1 month. Over in New South Wales, the government's looking at introducing new rules to help kids recover from concussions. Experts say kids need a lot of time to recover from the effects of a concussion, so they've recommended at least 2 days off school when diagnosed with one. Meanwhile, a new study has found that a lot of kids are getting hurt at indoor trampoline parks. Over the past 6 years, more than 450 kids have ended up in emergency departments. The most common injuries were sprains, strains and dislocations, but there were also some fractures and even head injuries. Most parks go through checks each year to make sure their trampolines and foam pits are safe, but health experts reckon the rules could be better. In Argentina, some of the country's beaches have been taken over by penguins. Hundreds of thousands of Magellanic penguins have been hanging out here for breeding season, but experts say they'll soon say goodbye and swim north to warmer waters. And finally, check out this video of a snake in Tasmania that has surprisingly good balance. The video was posted on social media showing a tiger snake slithering along a wire fence. Experts say snakes are actually very good climbers, and this one was probably just a bit curious. Next up, Queenslanders have suffered through some really high temps over the past week, and they're not the only ones to sweat it out this summer. It left us wondering, how do heat waves actually happen? We asked the ABC's weather experts to give us the lowdown.
Heat waves are Australia's deadliest natural disaster. They've killed more people than fires, floods and cyclones combined. But have you ever wondered where heat waves come from? Well, they come from here, the Central Australian desert. The reason the outback's so hot and dry is because of a big high pressure system which often sits over us. To understand more, you really have to go up. But I am surrounded by a high pressure system. It's very dry and there's not a lot of wind, so the temperature just builds and builds. You might have seen weather maps like this one. The H here represents a high pressure system, and it usually means good weather and clear skies for those below. The L represents a low pressure system, and that usually means the weather could be cloudy or rainy. High and low pressure systems are actually moving across the country all the time. Often it's high pressure systems that are responsible for pushing dry, warm air towards the coast. But it takes more than that to cause a heat wave. There are a few different systems that can contribute. First, droughts. If there's a drought here, the air that gets pushed down here will be hotter than usual. And if that high pressure system doesn't move, the hot air will stay around for longer, making the heat wave worse. Cyclones can also help to cause a heat wave. If there's a cyclone around here, it can push the heat here, where it gets sucked down over Central Australia, adding to the hot air already there. If these conditions happen to combine, then the heat wave is going to be much more intense and dangerous.
Well, heat waves are so dangerous because people are often caught unawares when they do it. They'll go out in a day when they can usually get away with something, and when it's really hot, their normal activities can lead to being overheated. You're particularly vulnerable at the extremes of age, so the very, very young and the elderly are more particularly at risk of getting heat stroke. But anyone's susceptible, anyone, and that's why it's a problem.
Out here in Alice, 40 degrees is just another summer's day. But down in Tassie, a couple of days over 30 can be enough to be dangerous. It's all about what you're used to. So keep an eye on your local forecast, and the next time there's a heat wave on the way, take it easy in the sun, and keep an eye out for your elderly neighbours and relatives. Perhaps go for a swim.
What's the hottest temperature ever recorded in Australia? Is it 40.6, 45.6 or 49.6 degrees? The answer is 49.6. That was recorded at Moomba in SA.
My name's Ian, and my question is, how does gravity work?
It dropped. It fell. Oh no! It dropped again. Is gravity getting you down? Introducing Gravigone, 'cause you're a better you in space. Thanks, Gravigone.
As if anybody's going to fall for that.
Hi, yes, I'll have one Gravigone, please. Or two. We'll just make it 4.
Unfortunately for Matt, there is no escaping gravity. Here on Earth, anyway. Gravity is basically the superglue that holds everything down. In fact, it's the reason we even have a down. But how does it actually work? Well, gravity is one of those things people have been wondering about for a really, really long time. There were lots of early theories and experiments to try to find out why things fall down. The guy who most of us think of as the grandfather of gravity is this guy, Sir Isaac Newton. He was an English mathematician, astronomer, theologian, author and physicist who came up with a theory about gravity almost 300 years ago. The story goes that Newton was sitting under a tree when an apple fell and hit him on the head. Although some say that never actually happened, but whatever. The point is that whatever fell, whether it was an apple, a banana or a fish, led to Newton asking this question. Why did the apple fall down onto the ground and not up into the sky? He realised there must be an invisible force pulling the apple to the ground, and he called that force gravity. Now, gravity works because every object that has mass is attracted or naturally pulled towards every other object that has mass. The force of that pull depends on how much mass an object has. An apple has a small mass, whereas the Earth has a much, much larger mass. So the apple falls towards the Earth. But the interesting thing about gravity is that it pulls everything towards the Earth at the same rate. That was discovered by a famous Italian guy called Galileo, who dropped a heavy ball and a light ball from the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Both were said to have fallen at the same speed. Although that probably didn't happen either. But in any case, the moral of the story is that the two balls fell at the exact same speed. Of course, if you dropped a feather and, say, a hammer, the feather would obviously take longer. That's because air pushes against the feather more than the hammer, slowing it down as it falls. However, if you did the same experiment somewhere without an atmosphere, say on the moon, you'd find they both fall at the same rate. And here's proof from US astronaut David Scott in 1971.
How about that?
Speaking of space, in order to get to the moon, you have to fight very hard to break away from gravity, which is why you need a really big rocket to, say, send a sports car into space. And why Matt will need something a little more legit than a Gravigorn.
I'm not sure if these are working. Need to buy some more.
If you dropped something, how far would it theoretically fall in 1 second? 1.8 metres, 9.8 metres, or 90.8 metres? The answer is 9.8 metres. It's been an exciting first week for the Aussies at the Winter Olympics. Matt Graham picked up silver in the men's moguls, Jared Hughes snagged silver in the snowboard cross, and Scotty James took out bronze in the snowboard halfpipe, while his school cheered him on back home. Nice. Meanwhile, Melbourne City is celebrating its third straight championship in the W League after defeating Sydney FC 2-0. Jess Fishlock made all the difference, scoring in the 35th minute, and then delivering this free kick that led a second goal from Jodie Taylor. City is the first club in league history to claim 3 consecutive titles. Footy fans have now had their first taste of AFL-X. It's the league's new pre-season comp with modified rules. It's played on a rectangular ground with fewer players on field and much shorter games. There's no centre bounce after a goal, and a 10-point super goal is awarded if it's kicked from the 40-metre mark. After 3 big nights, the overall winners were the Adelaide Crows, Melbourne Demons and the Brisbane Lions. Donovan Mitchell has won the NBA's annual dunk contest. The contest pits the league's best dunkers against each other, and this year saw some impressive ones. This amazing recreation of Vince Carter's 360-degree spin dunk from the 2000 comp got Mitchell the win. This was a highlight too, an incredible double-tap dunk. And finally, Tasmania has held its first scooter comp. More than 50 riders took part, and some of their tricks and stunts were pretty impressive. Out of the 50 riders, only 2 were girls.
Me and her were the only girls, so I kind of had to come second.
That's something the organisers say they want to change next time.
In 10 years, there might be like 100 girls in the comps.
Scooter pro Dylan says the sport is growing in popularity every year, and so is the quality of competition.
It was so much fun. Like I'd never thought that it would get this crazy, but it has. And now I'm over here, like inspiring all these little kids to just do their best in comps.
Finally today, 21-year-old Harley Windsor made history last week as the first Indigenous Australian to compete at the Winter Olympics. So let's find out more about him and his journey to South Korea.
This was an incredible moment for Harley. The culmination of a lifelong dream and a milestone for the whole country. The first time an Indigenous Australian has competed at the Winter Olympics. But it all started back when Harley was just 9 years old.
I got into figure skating by accident. I took a wrong turn with my mum one day and I found Blacktown ice rink, so and I could go in and everything kind of took off from there.
So different from the regular sports and I'd never done it before, so it sort of was a bit of an exotic sport to try.
It turned out he was a natural.
From such a young age, I always did Aboriginal dancing, and I've always been involved in Aboriginal culture, so I guess that sort of helped a bit with the movement on the ice and the transition from dancing from when I was young to skating now has really helped.
By the time he was 10, he'd won gold at a state championship, and within 3 years, he was competing overseas. Things have really taken off since pairing up with Katia, who moved here from Russia 2 years ago to dance with Harley. Their sport is all about working in unison with your partner and includes things like lifts, death spirals, and throw jumps, so you really need to be able to trust them.
I like skate with Harley. He's a good partner. He's not angry, he's quiet.
Their partnership was tough work to start with because they didn't speak the same language, but it turned out to be a good match. In March of last year, Harley and Katia became World Junior Champions, the first Aussie pair to win the title.
From Australia, Ekaterina Alexandrova-Volskaya and Harley Windsor.
Now he's officially an Olympian, Harley would like to use his achievements to inspire other Indigenous Aussies.
At first it was a little bit of a shock and stuff like that, but I guess it just makes me feel a bit proud and a little bit honoured that I can be the first one.
And while this team won't be coming home with a medal this time, this is just the start of what they hope to accomplish.
It's going to be a good memory for me, and a good experience that I can carry with me for the rest of my life.
And that brings us to the end of today's show. But you can always head to our website for more, including your chance to submit a question for BTN Investigates. And I'll see you next week for more BTN.